After 4 years of silence, I received a letter from my daughter, and my heart nearly jumped out of my chest with joy. I was about to open it when my wife shouted, "Stop!" I asked, "What's wrong?" She pointed and whispered, "Can't you see?" I looked closer, and what I saw shocked me to the core. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My hands trembled as I reached for the mailbox. Something about the white envelope on top made my pulse quicken before I even saw the handwriting. 4 years of empty mailboxes had trained me not to hope, but there it was. Lydia's careful script spelling out my name. July 22nd, her birthday. How could I forget I held the envelope against the afternoon light, studying the familiar curves of her letters, the way each stroke seemed to carry echoes of her childhood notes and school essays. The return address showed her Willow Heights apartment, the same place where everything fell apart, a modern building with sleek lines that always felt too impersonal for the girl I raised. My chest tightened with possibilities I'd buried long ago. Visions of reconciliation and flickering like distant lightning on a stormy horizon. "Agnes!" I called, rushing up the front steps. "Agnes, get over here quick!" My voice cracked with an excitement I hadn't felt in years, a rush that made my old knees ache from the sudden movement. The screen door slammed behind me as I hurried through the living room, still clutching the envelope like it might disappear into thin air, the paper crinkling slightly under my grip. "What's all the shouting about?" Agnes appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her apron dusted with flour from the pie she was baking. Her gray eyes immediately found the letter in my grip, widening with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Look at this." I held it up, watching her expression change from mild annoyance to surprise, her brows furrowing as she took in the sight. "It's from Lydia today, of all days." Agnes stepped closer, adjusting her glasses with a habitual gesture. "That's her handwriting, all right." She touched my arm gently, her fingers warm and steady against my sleeve. "Are you sure you're ready for this, George?" I turned the envelope over in my hands, feeling its weight, the slight texture of the paper that spoke of quality stationery. Not heavy enough for multiple pages, but substantial, real, like a tangible bridge across the years of quiet hurt. After 4 years of silence, my daughter had written to me on her 39th birthday, a day that used to be filled with cake and laughter in this very house. "I keep thinking this might be it," I whispered, my mind racing with scenarios of mended fences and shared holidays. Maybe she's finally ready to talk, to let go of the grudges that have kept us apart for so long. The afternoon sun slanted through our front window, casting everything in golden light that danced across the faded wallpaper we'd never gotten around to replacing. Outside neighbors were coming home from work, children playing in yards with the carefree energy of summer evenings, the world continuing as normal while our little corner held its breath. But inside our house, time had stopped, suspended in this moment of fragile anticipation. Agnes settled into the chair beside me, her presence steady and warm, a comforting anchor in the sea of emotions swirling through me. "Whatever it says, we'll handle it together." Her words a gentle reminder of the partnership we'd built over decades. I nodded, though my throat felt tight, constricted by the lump of unspoken fears and long-buried regrets. 4 years of hoping, of failed attempts, of lying awake in the dark hours, wondering if I'd been too stern, too unyielding in my worries about her choices. 4 years of missing my daughter's laugh, her quick wit that could light up a room the way she used to call me every Sunday, just a chat about nothing and everything, sharing stories from her bustling life in the city. The envelope felt heavier now, loaded with possibilities that made my pulse race even faster. Reconciliation, forgiveness, maybe even an invitation to be part of her life again, to meet for coffee or share a meal like we used to, or perhaps another rejection, another door slammed in my face with words that would cut deeper than before. I set it carefully on the coffee table between us, the wood scarred from years of family use, afraid to tear it open, afraid not to, my fingers itching to reveal its secrets, yet paralyzed by the what-ifs. The silence stretched until I could hear the kitchen clock ticking in the next room, each second amplifying the tension in the air. "She remembered I'd be thinking of her today," I said, finally the words breaking the quiet like a fragile spell. Agnes's hand found mine, her touch grounding me in the present. She always was thoughtful like that, even as a child remembering little details that made people feel seen. The memory hit me then, sudden and sharp, flooding my mind with vivid images. Not of recent years, but of birthday mornings when Lydia was small, racing down these same stairs in her pajamas, eyes bright with anticipation, her bare feet pattering on the wooden steps. Before life got complicated, before Marcus, before everything went wrong, when our home was filled with the simple joys of family life, unmarred by the shadows of later conflicts. I picked up the envelope again, studying the careful way she'd written our address, the ink flowing smoothly without hesitation. No mistakes, no crossed out letters, the precision suggesting she'd sat at her desk, perhaps in the quiet of her apartment, deliberating over each word. She'd taken time with this, planned it amid the busyness of her career that had to mean something good, a deliberate step toward healing. I can't remember the last time I felt this nervous. I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper, the admission hanging in the air like a confession. July 22nd, 2021. Agnes said quietly, her memory sharp as ever. The day you decided to drive over there and try to talk sense into her, the weight of her words pulling me back to that painful pivot point, the weight of that memory settled over me like a heavy blanket, thick with the dust of unresolved regrets. That terrible afternoon that changed everything between us. The sun beating down relentlessly as I navigated the city streets, my mind set on saving her from what I saw as a disastrous path. But maybe today would be different. Maybe this letter would finally bridge the gap that had grown between us, spanning the chasm, with words of understanding and love. I held my breath and prepared to tear open the envelope that might contain my daughter's words of forgiveness, my fingers poised on the edge of revelation. I sank into the kitchen chair, the envelope still unopened in my hands. The familiar weight of it triggered something deep in my memory, transporting me back to that July afternoon 4 years ago, when everything unraveled, the heat of the day pressing down like an unwelcome embrace. I remembered standing outside Lydia's apartment building, my finger hovering over her doorbell, the air thick with the scent of blooming urban gardens and distant traffic hum. The Willow Heights neighborhood bustled around me, young professionals rushing home with briefcases and laptops, couples walking dogs on leashes that matched their outfits. The energy of a city that never slowed down, pulsing with ambition and anonymity. I'd driven there with such determination, convinced I could make her see reason about Marcus. My knuckles white on the steering wheel the whole way. The apartment buzzed me up without question, the intercom crackling with static that mirrored my frayed nerves. When Lydia opened her door, she looked tired in a way that worried me. Dark circles under her eyes like bruises from sleepless nights. Her usually perfect posture slightly slumped as if carrying an invisible burden. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk, sweetheart, about your marriage," my words tumbling out in a rush, laced with the concern I'd bottled up for months. Her jaw tightened immediately, a familiar sign of defensiveness I'd seen since her teenage years. "If this is about Marcus again, it is about Marcus and about you making the biggest mistake of your life." My voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. She stepped back but didn't invite me in her body language, a clear barrier. "I'm 34 years old. I don't need relationship advice from my father," her tone sharp-edged with frustration. "When your husband is gambling away your future, you need advice from someone who cares about you?" I countered the words, heavy with the evidence I'd gathered. That's when Marcus appeared behind her, his hand possessive on her shoulder, a gesture that sent a wave of unease through me. The sight of him made my stomach churn, too smooth, too charming, the kind of man who could convince you to give him your last dollar and thank him for it. His smile always a little too perfect, his eyes calculating. "George," he said with false warmth, "what brings you by? I'm talking to my daughter about the casino receipts I saw in your car last month. My accusation hanging in the air like smoke." Lydia's face went white, the color draining as if I'd struck her. "You were snooping in our car. I was helping you move that bookshelf and papers fell out of the glove compartment." $1,500 in one night, Lydia. How many nights like that have there been? Marcus's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold underneath a glint of steel in his gaze. That was a work event. Client entertainment, his excuse smooth but unconvincing. Don't lie to me, son. I know the difference between business expenses and addiction, my voice firm, drawing on years of parental authority. This is my life. Lydia exploded, her words bursting forth like pent-up steam. My marriage, my decisions. When are you going to stop treating me like a child? When you stop acting like one? This man is destroying your credit. Probably already drained your savings, my concern turning to desperation. You don't know what you're talking about. But I could see in her eyes that I did know the flicker of doubt she tried to hide. The way she couldn't quite meet my gaze, the defensive set of her shoulders like armor, the way Marcus's grip on her shoulder tightened possessively, his fingers digging in just a bit too hard. What about family? Lydia, doesn't that mean anything to you anymore? Family! She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and painful. You mean the family that never accepted my choices, that questioned every decision I made? We questioned this one because we love you, my plea falling on deaf ears. No, you questioned it because you can't control me anymore. Marcus stepped forward, then his voice silky with false concern, smooth as polished marble. Maybe it's time for some space, George. Let Lydia make her own choices without interference. The manipulation was so smooth, so practiced, a web of words designed to ensnare. I watched my daughter's face as she absorbed his words, saw her building walls. I'd never be able to scale her expression, hardening like clay in a kiln. He's right, Dad. I think you should leave. The words hit me like physical blows, each one landing with bruising force. Lydia, please just think about what I'm saying. I'm thinking, and I'm choosing my husband over your suspicions. The door closed in my face with a soft click that echoed like thunder in my ears. I stood there for several minutes, hoping she'd change her mind, hoping the door would open again, the second stretching into an eternity of rejection. It never did, leaving me alone on the stoop with the weight of failure pressing down. Now, sitting in my kitchen 4 years later, I could still feel the weight of that rejection, a phantom ache that time hadn't fully healed. The drive home had been the longest of my life, the city lights blurring through unshed tears. The memory of that closed door led me to remember everything that came after. 4 years of desperate attempts to bridge the gap that seemed to widen with each passing month like a chasm growing deeper with every rain. I'd started calling the next day, then the day after that. Voice messages that went unanswered, text messages that showed as read but never replied to each one, a small arrow of disappointment. Agnes watched me wear a path in our kitchen floor, pacing with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to Lydia's recorded greeting over and over, her voice a ghost from happier times. Hi, sweetheart. It's Dad. I just wanted to say I'm sorry about yesterday. Maybe we could grab coffee and talk things through. Call me back. She never did, the silence amplifying my growing despair. By October, Marcus started answering her phone. She doesn't want to talk to you, George. Let me hear that from her. You heard it when you drove over here uninvited and upset her. Leave us alone. The line went dead, a finality that stung like salt in a wound. I tried driving to her apartment twice in November. The first time Marcus met me in the lobby, his expensive suit and practiced smile making my working man's clothes feel shabby, out of place in the polished marble space. This has got to stop, he said, blocking my path to the elevator with his body. You're causing her stress. I'm causing her stress. What about what you're doing to her bank account? His smile never wavered, but his eyes went cold like a shark sensing blood. Careful, old man. Harassment is a serious charge. The second visit was worse. He met me at my car before I even reached the building, his presence looming like a shadow. I warned you, he said, pulling out his phone with a flourish. One more visit, and I'm calling the police. Lydia doesn't want to see you. Christmas was the hardest part. The holidays amplifying the absence like an empty chair at the table. I'd always been the one to pick out Lydia's gifts, spending weeks finding exactly the right thing, wrapping it with care. That year, I chose a beautiful leather journal, the kind she'd loved since college, with her initials embossed in gold, a nod to her love of writing. It came back unopened. Return to sender stamped across the package in red ink, a rejection that cut deep. My birthday cards came back the same way. Mother's Day flowers for Agnes returned. Every attempt at connection bounced back like I was throwing stones at a brick wall, each return a fresh bruise on my heart. The final attempt came last spring. I'd heard through Susan that Lydia's marketing firm had moved to a new building downtown. I took a sick day from work and waited in the lobby, hoping to catch her during lunch, my palms sweaty with nerves. When she appeared walking with colleagues toward the revolving door, my heart nearly stopped the sight of her, bringing a rush of memories. She looked thinner, tired, but still beautiful. Still my little girl despite the years. Lydia. She turned, and for a split second I saw something like longing in her face, a fleeting vulnerability. Then it shuttered closed, replaced by guarded steel. Dad, you can't be here. Just 5 minutes, please. We used to be able to talk about anything. Her colleagues had stopped sensing drama, their whispers adding to the tension. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. Marcus will be furious if he finds out you were here. Then don't tell him. This is between us. Nothing is just between us anymore. Her voice cracked slightly, betraying the strain. I made my choice. You can unmake it. She shook her head, and I saw tears threatening, glistening in her eyes. It's too late for that. She walked away without looking back, leaving me standing in a corporate lobby surrounded by strangers who pretended not to stare their averted eyes at judgment. That night I told Agnes I was done trying. Some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt, the ashes too scattered by time. But sitting here now, holding this unexpected letter, I felt that old hope stirring again, rising like a phoenix from those ashes. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe some bridges could be rebuilt after all, with enough will and forgiveness. I stood up carrying the letter with me as I went to find Agnes. Whatever this envelope contained, we'd face it together. Our partnership a steady foundation in uncertain times. I walked back through the kitchen doorway, the envelope clutched against my chest like a treasure unearthed from long-forgotten soil. Agnes sat in her favorite armchair by the living room window. Afternoon sunlight catching the silver threads in her hair as she worked on her crossword puzzle, her concentration a familiar sight. Agnes. My voice came out softer than intended, reverent, almost laced with the awe of unexpected grace. She looked up, pencil suspended midair. George, you look like you've seen a ghost. Better than a ghost. I held up the envelope, my hand trembling slightly with contained energy. It's from Lydia today, of all days. The crossword book slipped from her lap as she stood. Are you certain? Look at the handwriting, those careful loops, the way she crosses her T's. I brought the envelope closer so she could examine it, the paper catching the light. She remembered it's her birthday. She's thinking about us. Agnes adjusted her reading glasses, studying the address with the focused attention she'd once given to patient charts. It does look like hers, she said slowly, after all these years of silence. Maybe she finally understood that family is the most important thing, her words carrying a tentative optimism. The hope in my own voice surprised me, bubbling up like a spring after drought. Maybe Marcus's control isn't as strong as we thought, the possibility igniting a spark in the dim corners of my heart. She reached for my free hand, squeezing gently, her touch, a lifeline. Oh, George, I've missed her so much. Her laugh, the way she used to call with every little triumph at work. Remember how proud she was when they promoted her to manager, before he poisoned her against us. The old anger tried to surface, but I pushed it down, refusing to let it taint this moment. Today was about hope, not bitterness, a rare gift after so long. But this letter changes everything. She reached out first, her initiative a sign of change. We stood there together, both staring at the envelope that might contain our daughter's words of forgiveness, the paper seeming to pulse with potential. The living room felt charged with possibility, like the air before a thunderstorm that promises to wash everything clean, to renew the parched earth. What do you think she says? Agnes whispered, her voice hushed with anticipation. Maybe she's pregnant, wants to tell us about grandchildren, the idea bringing a smile to her face. My imagination ran wild with possibilities, each one more heartwarming than the last. Or she left him, realized we were right about his gambling, or she just misses her dad, the simple sentiment warming me from within. Agnes's eyes filled with tears, reflecting the light like diamonds. 39 years old today, and part of her is still our little girl who used to climb into bed with us during thunderstorms, her small form seeking comfort in our arms. I nodded. Remembering birthday mornings filled with pancakes and torn wrapping paper when making Lydia happy was the easiest thing in the world, the house filled with the scent of syrup and joy. Before life got complicated, before Marcus, before everything went wrong, when our family was a haven of uncomplicated love. Whatever she says, we'll face it together, Agnes said, settling into the couch beside me, her shoulder brushing mine in solidarity. I positioned my finger under the envelope flap ready to tear it open and discover what our daughter wanted to tell us. After 4 years of silence, the paper felt substantial, important, real, a tangible link to the past and future. Here goes nothing, I murmured, starting to lift the flap, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and exhilaration. Wait. Agnes's sharp voice made me freeze. My finger stopped halfway under the envelope flap. Agnes's urgent tone cutting through my excitement like a blade, sharp and unexpected. Wait for what? She leaned closer, squinting at the address through her reading glasses, her face inches from the paper. Give me another look at that handwriting. Agnes, what's wrong? Something's not right. Her words laced with a growing certainty. She took the envelope from my hands, holding it up to the window light, tilting it this way and that to catch every nuance. Look at how she wrote your name. See the slant? I studied the letters more carefully, irritation prickling at my hope, a thorn in the bloom of optimism. It looks fine to me, but doubt was already seeping in. No George. Lydia's writing always slanted to the right. Always. 30 years of nursing taught me to notice these things, the details that could mean life or death. Her finger traced the letters with precision. This slant's left a subtle but telling discrepancy. Maybe she's stressed. People's handwriting changes when they're upset under pressure from life's demands. Not the fundamental slant. That's muscle memory ingrained from years of practice. Agnes held the envelope at arm's length, then close again, her scrutiny intense. And look at the pressure. Lydia has a heavy hand. She presses hard when she writes, leaving impressions on the paper beneath. These letters are too light, faint as whispers. My chest tightened with a different kind of fear, a chill spreading through me. You're imagining things, but my voice lacked conviction. Am I... Look at this A in George. Lydia makes her A's perfectly round, like little circles, smooth and even. This one has a pointed top, sharp as a peak. She pointed to specific letters, her analysis methodical. And she never ever makes her F's like that. Too fancy. Too many loops, elaborate in a way that's foreign to her style. Handwriting changes over time with age and experience. Not this much. Not the basic letter formations, the core shapes that define a person's script. Agnes's voice carried the authority of someone who'd spent decades observing subtle signs in patients' records and notes. This person is trying to copy her style, but getting the details wrong, the imitation clever but flawed. I wanted to argue, to defend my fragile hope, but doubt crept in like cold water soaking through my defenses. The more I looked, the more the differences became obvious. The spacing between words, the rhythm of the letters, even the way the pen had moved across the paper, hesitant, in places where Lydia's would flow. It all felt foreign, like a stranger's voice mimicking a loved one. But who had I started? Then stopped the question, hanging unfinished. I don't know. But this isn't from our daughter, the realization sinking in like lead. The envelope suddenly felt heavy in my hands, not with promise, but with deception, a poisoned gift. Someone had gone to the trouble of imitating Lydia's handwriting, of using our pain against us, exploiting the raw wound of our separation. The cruelty of it took my breath away, a vicious twist that left me reeling. Maybe I'm wrong, Agnes said softly, seeing the devastation on my face, her own expression softening with empathy. Maybe she learned to write differently. Or no. The word came out flat and dead, devoid of life. You're right. I can see it now, the admission tasting bitter on my tongue. The careful hope I'd built over the past 10 minutes crumbled like a house made of cards scattering into dust. Someone's playing games with us, the words laced with rising anger. We sat in silence, the envelope lying between us like evidence of our foolishness, a mocking artifact. Outside, children were coming home from school, their laughter drifting through the window, a sound that once would have reminded me of Lydia at that age, carefree and full of life. We have to open it, I said, finally, breaking the heavy quiet. We need to know what this is about to uncover the intent behind the deception. Agnes nodded reluctantly, her face etched with worry. Whatever it is, it's not going to be good news. Her words a somber prophecy. I tore open the envelope anyway, my hand steadier now that hope had died and been replaced by grim determination, a resolve born from necessity. If someone wanted to hurt us, I needed to know how and why to arm myself with knowledge. The paper crinkled as I unfolded it, my hands moving mechanically now that hope had curdled into dread, the sound amplified in the tense room. Agnes leaned against my shoulder, both of us peering at the single sheet of white paper, our breaths synchronized in anticipation. Dear Dad. I read aloud, my voice catching on the familiar word that now felt like a lie, a cruel impersonation. Read it all. Agnes whispered, her hand on my arm for support. I cleared my throat and continued the words, tasting foreign. I desperately need your help. I'm in the hospital and require emergency surgery that my insurance won't cover. The doctors say I need $18,000 immediately, or I might not survive. Oh my, Agnes gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I know we haven't talked in years, but you're the only one I can turn to. Please don't let our past disagreements prevent you from saving your daughter's life. I need you to immediately transfer the money to my cryptocurrency wallet and wallet number. The random string of letters and numbers felt like gibberish in my mouth, an alien code. I looked at Agnes, whose face had gone pale, drained of color. Time is critical. I continued reading. The surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning, and they won't proceed without payment. I'm sorry it took a crisis to reach out, but I'm desperate. Please help me, Dad. Your loving daughter, Lydia. The letter fell from my hands, fluttering to the coffee table like a dying bird, its descent slow and final. That's not how she talks, Agnes said immediately, her voice firm with conviction. She never called you Dad in letters. Always Daddy, or your name in cryptocurrency? I shook my head in disgust, the absurdity glaring. Lydia works in it. If she needed money, she'd use normal banking, not some digital nonsense. Her practical nature would demand transparency. I don't understand. She'd never be this formal with you either. Even when she was angry, her letters had personality, warmth, or fire, but never this cold detachment. This sounds like it was written by a robot, mechanical and soulless. I picked up the letter again, scanning for any detail that might feel authentic, a personal anecdote or reference. Nothing. No mention of her job, her life, no personal touches that would prove this came from my daughter. Just a generic plea designed to extract money from a desperate father preying on vulnerability. Who does this? My voice cracked with rage. A storm building inside. Who targets grieving parents with fake letters from their children, twisting love into a weapon? Someone who knows about our situation. Agnes's analytical mind was working now past the initial shock, piecing together the puzzle. They knew Lydia's name, our address, that we've been estranged. This isn't random. It's calculated with insider knowledge. But how could they know to use her handwriting to send it on her birthday details that speak of intimate familiarity? We stared at each other as the implications sank in a chilling realization dawning. Someone had researched us, studied our family dynamics, crafted this deception specifically to wound us where we were most vulnerable, exploiting the cracks in our relationships. The violation felt almost physical, an intrusion into our private grief. $18,000, I said, reading the amount again, the figure leaping out. They really thought we'd fall for this, desperate enough to act without question. You were ready to tear open that envelope with pure joy 5 minutes ago. Agnes pointed out gently, her observation kind but pointed. If I hadn't noticed the handwriting, she didn't need to finish the implication clear. I would have believed every word. Would have been calling banks and trying to figure out how to send cryptocurrency to save my daughter's life, my actions fueled by blind paternal instinct. The scammer had counted on my love, my guilt, my desperate need for reconciliation, turning them into tools for theft. I need to call Lydia, I said, standing abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Right now I need to make sure she's safe, that this isn't connected to something worse, a larger threat. Agnes nodded grimly, her expression mirroring my concern. And we need to find out who did this to uncover the perpetrator. I walked to the kitchen phone, my hand shaking with a different kind of energy now. Not hope, but fury, a burning resolve to protect what remained. Someone had weaponized my love for my daughter, and I was going to find out who, no matter the cost. The kitchen phone sat on the counter like an old friend, its black receiver worn smooth from years of family conversations, crises averted and joys shared. I snatched it up, my fingers automatically dialing the number I'd memorized 4 years ago, but never forgotten, etched into my mind like a scar. "Come on, Lydia, pick up," I muttered under my breath. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before her voicemail clicked on. That familiar voice, professional and distant now, a far cry from the warm daughter who used to call me every Sunday just to chat, sharing the minutiae of her day. "Lydia, it's your father. Please call me back as soon as possible. It's important," my words urgent but controlled. I hung up and immediately dialed again, pacing across the linoleum floor while Agnes watched from the doorway, her arms crossed in worry. Same result, voicemail again. "Lydia, this is urgent. Something's happened and I need to talk to you right away. Please, sweetheart, call me back." The endearment slipped out before I could stop it. A remnant from when we still talked, when she still cared what her old man had to say, a echo of better times. Third try. My hands were shaking now, whether from anger or anxiety. I couldn't tell, the emotions blending into a turbulent storm. "Lydia, someone is using your name to try to scam us. They sent a fake letter asking for money, pretending to be you. I need to know if you're safe and if this is connected to something bigger. Call me immediately." I slammed the receiver down harder than necessary, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. "She's not answering," I told Agnes, though that was obvious, my frustration evident. "Maybe she's at work. It's only 3:30 on a Saturday afternoon. She might be caught up in a meeting. Or maybe he won't let her answer calls from unknown numbers, the possibility darkening my thoughts. The thought made my chest tighten, a vice of concern. What if he screens all her calls, controls who she talks to, isolating her further? Agnes stepped closer, her hand gentle on my shoulder, a soothing presence. "George, your blood pressure. You're getting worked up," her concern maternal and familiar. Of course I'm worked up. Someone is targeting our family, using our pain to steal money, and our daughter won't even take a phone call from her father. The words came out bitter, laced with the accumulated hurt of years. 4 years of frustration boiling over, spilling into the room. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the fake letter still lying on the kitchen counter, evidence of someone's cruelty and calculation, its presence a taunt. The cryptocurrency address seemed to mock me with its random string of letters and numbers. So impersonal, so cold, a digital void. "I'm driving over there, the decision firm. George, no." You know how that ended last time, the warning in her voice. This is different. I'm not going to lecture her about her marriage. I'm going to warn her that someone is using her identity for fraud to protect her from unseen threats. I grab my car keys from the hook by the back door, the metal cool in my palm. She has a right to know someone is impersonating her, to be aware of the danger. What if she doesn't believe you? What if she thinks you made up the letter as an excuse to contact her? The possibilities stopped me cold. A chill of doubt. Lydia was smart enough to consider that angle, suspicious enough after 4 years of silence to question my motives, to see manipulation where there was concern. But the alternative was doing nothing while someone used her name for criminal purposes, a passive acceptance I couldn't stomach. Then I'll show her the letter. Let her see the handwriting that isn't hers, the cryptocurrency scam, the generic medical emergency that doesn't match anything real about her life, the details that would prove my sincerity. I headed for the garage door, my steps purposeful. I can't just sit here knowing someone is targeting our family, the inaction intolerable. Be careful, George. Remember what the doctor said about your heart, her worry evident. I paused at the door, one hand on the knob, turning back to her. My heart's been broken for 4 years, Agnes. A little confrontation won't make it worse, though. The words carried more bravado than I felt. The afternoon sun hit me as I backed out of the driveway, Agnes's worried face visible in the front window, a silhouette of concern. Traffic was light leaving Brookside, but I knew it would get heavier as I approached the city, the roads filling with weekend travelers. 45 minutes to Willow Heights. 45 minutes to figure out what I was going to say to the daughter who'd chosen her husband over her family, who'd refused every attempt at reconciliation, who might slam the door in my face the moment she saw me standing there, her expression closing like a book. But someone was using her name to hurt us, and that crossed a line I couldn't ignore, a violation that demanded action. The engine hummed steadily as I merged onto Riverside Boulevard, downtown Metropolis's skyline, rising like concrete mountains in the distance, towering symbols of progress and isolation. Saturday afternoon traffic moved at a decent pace, giving me too much time to think, my mind cycling through scenarios like a reel. Someone had studied our family dynamics carefully enough to know about the estrangement to time the letter for Lydia's birthday to forge her handwriting, well enough to fool me initially, the effort speaking of deliberate malice. This wasn't some random scammer casting a wide net. This was targeted personal cruel, designed to exploit our deepest wounds. A delivery truck slowed ahead of me, forcing everyone into the left lane, the delay adding to my frustration. I drummed my fingers on the steering wheel, watching the river stretch endlessly to the east, its waters choppy under the gathering clouds. Gray skies were building over the water, promising rain later, a storm that mirrored my inner turmoil. The anger that had fueled my decision to drive here began mixing with familiar doubt, a cocktail of emotions. What if Lydia really did refuse to see me? What if she accused me of harassment, of fabricating the letter as manipulation? 4 years of silence had created a gulf that might be unbridgeable, deep as an ocean. But the alternative was worse, doing nothing while someone weaponized our family pain for profit, allowing the deception to fester. Traffic thickened as I approached downtown, the usual weekend congestion of tourists and shoppers heading to Harbor Point and the Grand Avenue. I took the East Avenue exit, winding through streets that grew progressively more upscale as I entered Willow Heights. Lydia's neighborhood represented everything she'd achieved without us. Professional success, financial independence, a life carefully constructed to exclude the parents who'd raised her a world of polished facades. The townhouses here cost more than I'd made in 6 years of architecture work. I'd driven these streets before during my failed reconciliation attempts, memorizing the route to my daughter's door, each turn a reminder of past rejections. The brick facades and manicured gardens spoke of young professionals who'd made it, who belonged to a different social class than their working-class parents, a divide that stung. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as I imagined the conversation ahead, rehearsing lines in my mind. Best-case scenario, Lydia would listen, understand the threat, maybe even thank me for warning her a small crack in the wall. Worst case, she'd see this as another attempt to interfere in her life, another reason to keep me at arm's length, reinforcing the barriers. What if she genuinely didn't know about the letter? That seemed most likely. Why would she be involved in scamming her own parents? But then who was behind it? Marcus was the obvious suspect. But would he really stoop to forging his wife's handwriting to steal from her family, risking everything? The neighborhoods changed as I drove deeper into Willow Heights, from busy commercial streets to quieter residential blocks lined with expensive cars and joggers in designer athletic wear, their strides purposeful. These were Lydia's people, now her chosen community of successful urbanites, who probably never dealt with the kind of working-class struggles Agnes and I had faced, their lives cushioned by privilege. I found a parking spot 2 blocks from her townhouse, feeding quarters into the meter with slightly shaking hands, the coins clinking like warnings. The walk would give me time to prepare, to figure out exactly how to present this situation without sounding accusatory or desperate, each step composing my approach. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows between the buildings, elongating forms like stretched memories, and I could hear the distant sounds of a neighborhood barbecue, children playing in a nearby park with joyful shouts. Normal Saturday activities for people with normal family relationships? A stark contrast to my fractured one. Lydia's townhouse came into view. 3 stories of red brick with black shutters, a small front garden filled with flowers I didn't recognize, vibrant and meticulously tended. Expensive, tasteful, everything she'd wanted that we couldn't provide when she was growing up, a symbol of her independence. Lights were on in the front windows, casting a warm glow that belied the chill in my heart. Someone was home, the presence both reassuring and daunting. I stood at the bottom of her front steps, looking up at the burgundy door with its brass knocker and security system panel, the metal gleaming. 4 years since I'd last stood here. 4 years since she'd chosen her husband over her father's warnings, a choice that haunted me. My finger hovered over the doorbell, hesitation warring with resolve. The doorbell chimed with an elaborate melody that echoed through the townhouse, a sophisticated tune that spoke of upgraded tastes. Footsteps approached. Quick, light steps I remembered from childhood, evoking memories of her running to greet me after work. The security peephole darkened as someone looked through, then went light again. A pause, then the sound of locks turning multiple bolts for added security. The door opened to reveal Lydia, older now, but still unmistakably my daughter, lines of experience etched around her eyes. Her dark hair was shorter than I remembered, styled in a way that made her look more sophisticated, more distant, framing her face with purposeful elegance. She wore a casual dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, fabric flowing with quiet luxury. Dad. The word came out flat, neither welcoming nor hostile, just surprised, hanging in the air like an unfinished thought. Hello, Lydia. We stared at each other across the threshold, 4 years of silence stretching between us like a physical barrier thick with unspoken words. She looked healthy, which relieved me more than I wanted to admit, her posture straight, despite the surprise. No signs of the emergency surgery mentioned in the fake letter, her vitality a quiet reassurance. What are you doing here? I need to ask you something important. I reached into my jacket pocket, the fabric rustling. Did you write this? I held out the letter, watching her eyes scan the familiar handwriting that wasn't quite hers, her expression shifting. Her brow furrowed as she read, genuine confusion replacing the guarded surprise, deepening into bewilderment. I didn't write this. She looked up at me sharply, her gaze piercing. Where did you get it? It came in today's mail on your birthday. Dad, I haven't written to you in 4 years. I didn't write this letter. Her voice carried conviction, but also something else hurt that I would even ask, as if my question proved I didn't know her at all anymore, a sting of disconnection. Then who did? Who would forge your handwriting to ask for money? You tell me. You're the one who brought it here. Lydia, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm trying to protect you. Someone used your name, your handwriting, your identity to try to scam $18,000 from your parents. The words came out sharper than I intended, edged with frustration. That's convenient. Her tone shifted from confused to cold, a wall rising. You fabricate some letter as an excuse to show up at my house uninvited. Fabricate. The accusation hit me like a slap, sharp and undeserved. Why would I do that? Because you've been trying to contact me for 4 years and this was the only way left. Behind her, I caught sight of Marcus entering the hallway. He wore expensive casual clothes, the kind of weekend outfit that probably costs more than my car payment, casual, yet calculated. His appearance wasn't accidental. He'd been listening, his steps too quiet for coincidence. Lydia, who is it? He asked, though he obviously knew, his tone laced with feigned casualness. My father. Apparently someone's been writing fake letters from me asking for money. Marcus's face showed concern, but something flickered in his eyes, too quick for me to identify a shadow of unease. That sounds like a scam. You should report it to the police, George. Maybe I will. I studied his face, looking for any sign that he recognized the letter, scrutinizing every micro-expression. Strange coincidence, though. $18,000. That's about what someone might lose in a really bad night at the casino. Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a telltale sign. I wouldn't know anything about that. Wouldn't you, Dad? That's enough. Lydia stepped protectively closer to her husband, her body a shield. You can't just show up here making accusations. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions. I looked between them, noting how Marcus's hand had moved to Lydia's shoulder, possessive, controlling his fingers, resting with intent. Someone targeted our family specifically, someone who knew about our situation, your birthday, your handwriting style. Anyone could find that information online these days, Marcus said dismissively, his words quick to deflect. Could they find samples of Lydia's handwriting? Could they know she's been estranged from her parents for exactly 4 years? Dad, you need to leave. Lydia's voice carried finality, resolute and unyielding. I didn't write that letter. I don't know who did, and I can't help you figure it out. Can't or won't? Both. She started to close the door, her hand firm on the knob. Don't come here again without calling first. I tried calling 3 times. You didn't answer. Then maybe take the hint. The door closed with a soft but definitive click, leaving me standing on the front step with more questions than answers, the sound resonating in my chest. I'd accomplished nothing except confirming that Lydia genuinely didn't know about the letter, her confusion authentic. But Marcus's reaction bothered me, too defensive, too eager to end the conversation, his composure cracking just enough. I walked slowly back to my car. The fake letter still in my pocket, feeling like I'd missed something important, a puzzle piece just out of reach. The lock clicked behind me with such finality that I almost turned around to knock again, my fist half raised. But Lydia had made her position clear. She didn't want to see me, didn't believe me, and thought I'd fabricated the letter as manipulation, a desperate ploy. Walking back to my car felt like moving through thick water, each step heavier than the last, the pavement seeming to pull at my shoes. The golden evening light that had seemed hopeful during my drive here now felt mocking, illuminating my failure in harsh detail, casting long shadows that mirrored my defeat. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, watching Lydia's townhouse shrink in my rearview mirror, a diminishing symbol of lost connection. 4 years of hoping for reconciliation, and I had managed to make things worse, deepening the divide. She probably thought I was getting desperate in my old age, creating elaborate schemes just to force contact, a sad figure clinging to the past. Traffic moved slowly on Riverside Boulevard, giving me too much time to replay the conversation, each word dissected for clues. Something about Marcus's behavior bothered me, but I couldn't put my finger on what an itch I couldn't scratch. The way he'd appeared so quickly behind Lydia, like he'd been listening, the slight tenseness in his voice when he suggested reporting the letter to police, a hint of strain, the protective way he'd stood with his hand on her shoulder, fingers tense. Most telling was his reaction when I mentioned casino gambling, just a flicker barely noticeable but there like a crack in glass. But I'd spent 40 years as an architect learning to notice when something didn't fit properly, when a structure was unstable. By the time I reached Brookside, instead of turning toward home, I found myself pulling into Lakeside Park, the same place where I used to bring Lydia when she was small, where we'd feed ducks and talk about everything and nothing, the memories vivid as yesterday. The bench I chose overlooked the pond, now empty of ducks, but still peaceful in the fading light, the water rippling gently. I pulled out the fake letter again, studying it with fresh eyes, the paper creased from handling. Agnes had been right about the handwriting. Too many small details were wrong, imperfections glaring under scrutiny. But whoever wrote this knew enough about our family to target us specifically, $18,000, the exact amount someone might need to cover gambling debts accumulated over months of bad luck at Metropolis's casinos, a sum that spoke of desperation. Someone who had access to samples of Lydia's handwriting, who knew about our estrangement, who understood exactly which emotional buttons to push, leveraging the pain for gain, someone who lived in the same house as my daughter, intimate with her daily life. The more I thought about it, the more Marcus's behavior made sense. His eagerness to end the conversation, his defensiveness when I mentioned casinos, the way he'd positioned himself between Lydia and me like a barrier shielding secrets. He wasn't protecting her from an unwelcome father. He was protecting himself from exposure from the light of truth. A cool breeze rustled the trees, carrying the first hint of autumn's approach leaves, whispering secrets. Change was coming whether any of us wanted it or not, inevitable as the seasons. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in my pocket. Evidence not of Lydia's betrayal, but of someone else's desperation and manipulation, a key to unlocking the truth. Someone who thought he could use our family's pain for his own financial salvation, underestimating our resilience. The park was growing quiet as families gathered their children and headed home for dinner, the laughter fading into dusk. Normal families who talked to each other, who didn't have years of silence to bridge, who didn't have to worry about fraud and manipulation tearing them apart, their bonds intact. But we weren't a normal family anymore. We were a damaged one, held apart by someone who benefited from our separation. Someone who needed us to stay angry and distant because reconciliation would mean exposure, the unraveling of his control. Standing up from the bench, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 4 years. Not hope exactly, but determination, a steel resolve forging within. Marcus had made a mistake today. He'd shown his hand just enough for someone paying attention to notice a slip in his facade. I walked back to my car already planning what I'd tell Agnes, the strategy taking shape. We needed to wait and watch to gather more evidence discreetly. If Marcus had written that letter, he'd probably made other mistakes too. Desperate people usually did their haste-breeding errors. The drive home took only 5 minutes, but it felt like emerging from a long dark tunnel into light, a shift in perspective. For the first time since the estrangement, I had a target for my anger that wasn't my own daughter, a clear adversary. 4 days passed like slow torture. Agnes and I discussed the situation, endlessly analyzing every detail of my confrontation with Lydia. Every suspicious reaction from Marcus, we decided to wait to let things develop naturally, rather than pushing harder and risk making everything worse. Patience our ally. Wednesday evening arrived gray and drizzly, the kind of weather that matched my mood clouds, heavy with unshed rain. Agnes was in the kitchen preparing dinner when the doorbell rang at exactly 7:00, a punctual chime. "I'll get it." I called expecting maybe a neighbor or delivery driver, the mundane interruption. The last person I anticipated seeing was my daughter standing on the front porch soaking wet from the rain, clutching a manila folder against her chest, her figure silhouetted against the stormy sky. "Lydia." "Dad, I need to talk to you." Her voice cracked slightly raw with emotion. "I found something terrible." She looked like she'd been crying, mascara streaked. Her usually perfect hair hung limp around her face, and her expensive clothes were wrinkled as if she'd thrown them on without care, disheveled in distress. But it was her eyes that stopped me cold. They held the same desperate clarity I'd seen in the mirror 4 years ago, a mirror of my own past pain. "Come in, sweetheart. You're soaking," I urged, concern overriding surprise. I stepped aside, watching her shake rain droplets from her jacket, water pooling on the mat. Agnes appeared in the hallway, took one look at Lydia's distressed state, and immediately shifted into maternal mode, her instincts kicking in. "Oh, honey, what's wrong? Let me get you a towel." "I'm fine, Agnes, Lydia opened the manila folder with trembling hands, papers rustling. "Dad, look at these papers. I found them in Marcus's desk." She spread several sheets across the coffee table. Even from across the room I could see what they were. Practice sheets filled with handwriting exercises. Row after row of attempts to copy familiar letter formations, meticulous but imperfect. "What am I looking at?" I asked, though my heart was already racing, suspicion confirmed. "Practice sheets." He was trying to copy my handwriting. Her voice broke completely, fracturing on the words. "Dad, look at this one." She pointed to a sheet covered with attempts at writing her own name. Her address, even what looked like draft versions of the fake letter I'd received. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, a damning collection. I found these yesterday when I was looking for our insurance papers. They were hidden in a folder marked business expenses. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smudging makeup. I confronted him about it last night. "What did he say?" At first he denied everything, said they weren't his, that maybe someone planted them. She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. But when I pressed him when I threatened to call you and ask if you'd really received a letter, he confessed. He broke down completely. "Dad, he has gambling debts, serious ones. He's been going to the casino in Lakeside 3-4 times a week for months. He owes money to people who aren't patient about collecting." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity, a puzzle snapping together. Marcus's nervousness during my visit, his eagerness to get rid of me, his defensive reaction to any mention of gambling. It all made perfect sense now, the threads connecting. "He targeted you because he knew about our estrangement," Lydia continued. "He thought you'd be so desperate to hear from me that you'd send money without asking too many questions." "How much does he owe?" $42,000. The number fell between us like a stone, heavy and unyielding. The letter asking for $18,000 was just the first payment. He planned to send more letters, different medical emergencies, until he got enough to cover his debts. I sat down heavily, the full scope of Marcus's manipulation finally clear, a web of deceit unraveling. He hadn't just been a bad husband. He'd been systematically using our family's pain for his own criminal purposes, exploiting vulnerabilities. "Dad, I'm so sorry." Lydia's tears started flowing again, unchecked. "You were right about him 4 years ago. You tried to warn me and I chose him over you. I let him convince me that you were trying to control my life when you were actually trying to protect me. Sweetheart, no, don't blame yourself. Let me finish. I should have listened to you. I should have seen the signs. You and Agnes are the only people in the world who would never lie to me or hurt me, and I threw that away because a manipulator told me I should. Agnes moved to sit beside her on the couch, wrapping an arm around her shoulders, a comforting embrace. The important things that you found out the truth? Her words soothing. I'm filing for divorce, Lydia said firmly, her resolve steeling. Tomorrow I can't stay married to someone who would try to steal money from my parents by pretending to be me. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her for the first time in 4 years, and saw not the defensive woman who'd shut me out, but the strong, intelligent person Agnes and I had raised resilient and wise. She'd been manipulated and isolated, but she hadn't been broken, her spirit intact. Can you forgive me? She whispered, her voice small. I didn't trust my voice to answer, so I just held out my arms. She fell into them like she was 11 years old again, and for the first time in 4 years, my family was whole, the embrace mending fractures. Come on, both of you, Agnes said, standing up and smoothing her apron with purposeful hands. Let's sit down properly and talk about this over a meal. I was just making pot roast. There's plenty for 3, her practicality a grounding force. We moved into the kitchen together, and I watched Agnes automatically set a third place at our small table, the clink of plates, a symphony of reunion. The simple domesticity of the moment, plates and silverware arranged with care. The smell of dinner wafting warmly. My daughter, sitting in the chair she'd occupied as a child, felt like a miracle, a restoration of what was lost. I can't believe I let him isolate me from you for so long, Lydia said, accepting the plate Agnes placed before her, steam rising invitingly. He was so subtle about it, always finding reasons why I couldn't visit, excuses layered like veils. Why phone calls were inconvenient. Why you two were trying to manipulate me, his words planting seeds of doubt. Professional manipulators are good at their work. I said, my tone reflective. Don't blame yourself for being deceived by an expert. It's a skill honed to exploit trust. But the signs were there. The secrecy about money, the way he controlled my schedule, like a puppeteer, how he always had an explanation for why my family was the problem, rationalizations that seemed logical at the time. She pushed food around her plate, absently lost in recollection. He made me believe that choosing him meant proving my independence, framing it as growth. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine, the contact warm and reassuring. The important thing is that you saw through it, eventually emerging stronger. I should have seen through it 4 years ago when you tried to warn me. Should have, could have, would have. Agnes's voice carried the practical wisdom of decades tempered by experience. None of that matters now. What matters is moving forward, building from here. I stood up and walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept matches, the wood sliding with a familiar scrape. Speaking of moving forward, there's something we need to do, a ritual to close the chapter. I pulled out the fake letter, now wrinkled from being carried around for days, its edges frayed. This thing has caused enough damage to our family, a symbol of division. Understanding immediately, Lydia nodded, her eyes resolute. We moved to the kitchen sink, all 3 of us crowding around the basin, shoulders touching in unity. I struck a match and held the flame to one corner of the letter. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening as it burned, smoke curling upward like released spirits. Good riddance, Lydia whispered, watching the last traces of Marcus's deception wash down, the drain ashes swirling away. With the letter destroyed, Agnes disappeared into the living room and returned carrying a thick photo album, the one filled with pictures from Lydia's childhood, its cover worn from frequent handling. She opened it to a page showing a gap-toothed 7-year-old Lydia at a Bears game, grinning between her parents' cotton candy in hand. Remember this day? Agnes asked, her finger tracing the image. You insisted on getting a hot dog at every inning. And Dad kept buying them for me, even though I only ate half of each one, the memory bringing warmth. Lydia laughed, the first genuine laughter I'd heard from her in years, light and freeing. We spent the next hour looking through photos, remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings, family vacations to the lake, and quiet Sunday afternoons in the backyard, each snapshot a thread weaving us back together. Each picture was proof that we'd been a loving family once, that the bonds between us were stronger than any manipulator could permanently break, resilient as roots. I've missed this so much, Lydia said, touching a picture of herself at 15, rolling her eyes at something I'd said a typical teen moment captured. I've missed having parents who actually cared about my well-being instead of what they could get from me. You'll always have that, I said firmly, the promise solemn. No more years of silence. We stay in touch from now on, no matter what regular calls and visits. Never again, she promised, her commitment echoing mine. And Dad, I want to write you a real letter next week when things settle down. A real letter in my real handwriting telling you everything I've wanted to say for 4 years, unfiltered and true. The contrast was perfect. From fake communication designed to steal money to genuine connection meant to rebuild love. It felt like the universe correcting itself, aligning stars. What about Marcus? Agnes asked, practically grounding us in reality. Where will you stay during the divorce proceedings? I've already moved out, Lydia said. I'm staying at a hotel for now, but I was hoping. She looked between us uncertainly. Vulnerability in her eyes. Could I maybe stay in my old room for a few weeks, just until I find my own place? Sweetheart, this is your home, I said, the words heartfelt. It always has been. We just lost you for a while, but now you're back. As we cleaned up the dinner dishes together, the three of us moving around the kitchen in comfortable synchronization, clinking plates and sharing small tasks, I marveled at how quickly the natural rhythms of family life reasserted themselves, like a well-oiled machine resuming operation. It was as if the 4 years of separation had been a bad dream, dissolved by truth, and honesty fading into irrelevance. Later, as Lydia settled into her old bedroom, I stood in the doorway, watching her organize her things, the room unchanged since her last visit, preserved like a time capsule. She looked younger somehow, freed from the weight of maintaining a marriage built on lies and manipulation, her shoulders lighter. Thank you for not giving up on me, she said quietly, her voice soft with gratitude. Never, I replied. Family doesn't give up. That's what makes it family, and the truth simple and profound. Outside rain continued falling, washing the world clean for tomorrow, a fresh start. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.